So, you've just watched Scream for the very first time, my young Padawan, and now you come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding. No, I'm kidding. We leave our film bro vibes at the door on this channel, please. So you've become swept up in the Scream 6 hype and you've decided to watch the entire franchise leading up to its release. Whether it be for the first time or the 50th time, I'm here to help. Because maybe now you're new to the discourse. And now suddenly you need to be able to engage with all of us weirdos online who say things like, Billy and Stu are the definition of homoerotic subtext. Not to worry, I'm gonna help you become an insider with all the most important cultural touchstones of this franchise. Character icon status, the most important memes, the funnest of facts. This is also not an I watch Scream, so you don't have to. Oh no. If you haven't seen this film, you better skedaddle. You better scurry over to that couch of yours and watch this entire franchise stat. We're watching Scream. So let me walk you through the structure of today's video because we're starting with a quick recap of the story behind the movie. I finally read It All Began with a Scream. This is a fantastic book I highly recommend. I'll give you a SparkNotes version of the timeline of this film, including all the best fun facts and quotes from this book. Then I realized that I've reviewed this entire franchise on my channel, but it was when I was just starting out and I have never given this franchise a proper plot breakdown. And that feels like a crime. So that's what we're doing next, with an emphasis on the most important and subversive plot points. I'm also going to emphasize what I feel are the most underrated moments from this franchise, because there are a lot of them. After that, you will surely be another member of the overly informed Scream fan club. If you really want to join the Scream fan club though, one way to expedite that process is to join the Cult of Haunted Hippie. You can do that by simply subscribing to this channel, giving me a like on this video, leaving me a comment at any point, and of course, if you want to be the first to know when we're having our next gathering, then click that notification bell. All of that out of the way, it's time to start our history lesson. Hopefully we're all already aware of the most popular subgenre of the 1980s, the slasher. We had Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger just absolutely tearing shit up during that decade. But you know what? By the 90s, people were like, I'm kind of tired of this, like what else you got? Eventually, audiences grew tired of the seemingly unkillable villains in 1980s slasher films. Seeing the same boogeyman get killed and then easily resurrected in the sequel became redundant. So writer Kevin Williamson was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do something about that. Scream originally was not going to be a screenplay though. He wrote it as a one-act play in college about a girl that gets taunted by somebody on the phone. At the time, Kevin Williamson was also suffering nightmares about the Gainesville Ripper because they had just killed 5 college students in 4 days. Apparently inspired by those nightmares, one day Kevin Williamson woke up from one and it took him just one weekend to bang out the entire script that he would title Scary Movie. Now because you did as I said and you watched this movie before watching this video, you know that Drew Barrymore is briefly in this film. She was originally cast as Sydney Prescott, our lead and final girl. That will change a little bit later on in this story. Of course, we also know that Wes Craven directed this iconic film, but many times over he almost didn't. Despite his resume, when Craven's name was brought up in discussions, the team wasn't sure if he was right for the job. Idiots, the lot of them are just right bumpkins, bummy idiots. Maybe improv is just not my calling. Initially, after reading the script, Wes Craven had agreed to produce, but declined to direct. Julie Plec theorized it was sending up the genre, and I think he was uncomfortable with the parts of that felt like it was making fun of the tropes and of the devices that he himself had created. If it weren't for one Julie Plec though, who was hired to replace Craven's previous assistant, we would not have gotten the Scream we have today. She was the one who got him to change his mind about the project, so let's raise a glass for her today. It was the money too though, I'm not gonna lie. He said, well, tell them to make me an offer I can't refuse. That's exactly what they did. That's how they got him. Money. So now they've attached one of the most iconic horror directors of all time to direct, but that cast, ooh baby. We'll be talking about their characters in depth in a little bit, but these actors, already we know that Drew Barrymore is playing Sydney, wink wink, but they got some other huge stars to appear in the films as well as favors to the filmmakers. This includes Linda Blair as a pushy reporter outside of Woodsboro High. It also includes Henry Winkler as the school principal. This was a trend that continued well after the first installment because after its success, people were clamoring to be in these movies. The icon Gale Weathers is of course played by Courtney Cox, but did you know that they originally wanted to cast Brooke Shields in the role? Whoa! Her and Janine Garofalo were considered for this role, but Courtney Cox kind of wormed her way in. Vince Vaughn had also auditioned for the role of Billy Loomis, but he wouldn't get to fulfill his Psycho Killer dreams until the Psycho remake just 2 years later. But we also almost didn't get to have our fave Skeet Ulrich cast as Billy Loomis because his communication with the casting directors was so bad. We kept calling the agent and he never showed up for the auditions. He never came in. He would just cancel, whatnot. It wasn't being difficult. I think he just couldn't get the schedule. For some reason, that's hilarious to me. But this wasn't even the most difficult part of casting, though. Drew Barrymore herself elected to change her role to Casey Becker because she rightfully thought that it would shock audiences a lot more if she was the first to go. But apparently finding their Sidney Prescott was the most difficult part of casting this film. Brittany Murphy was in the running at one point. I think it would have made for a very different vibe. They all had to do screen tests with Skeet Ulrich before Neve Campbell was ultimately awarded the role. Another interesting almost is that Natasha Lyonne was in the running for a one Tatum Riley, but she was only 16 at the time, and so they deemed her too young for the role. Thank God, because Rose McGowan had that shit on lock. Can we hear some noise from the Tatum Riley fan club? Yeah. The actress knew her character so fully that when she showed up to set and the wardrobe and set dressing didn't match the character, she fought to correct the inconsistency. The way she spoke to the set dresser and the costume designer made me kind of clutch my pearls too. She was like, "You need to wear these white Keds." She's like, "They're very now." I'm like, "They're very never." A comedian she was. She went shopping for majority of her outfits in the movie, including the outfit she would die in, which many consider to be her most iconic look. Last interesting almost for you, Seth Green was also in the running to play Randy. But then Jamie Kennedy came into his audition and he was everything they wanted and more, and so of course he got the role. One of the most iconic performances that you never even get to see on screen in these movies is from a one Roger L. Jackson. He recalls that some of the other people who were auditioning with him had the mentality that they were looking for the next Freddy Krueger, and he was like, I don't think so. The voice had to be kind of sexy. I know from some experience the sorts of voices that some of the ladies like. It's gotta be a little textured, a little colored, have a little interest to it, a little warm, and focus all the attention on her.
Wait, don't hang up.
What?
I want to talk to you for a second.
Personally, I get exactly what he was saying, and him understanding that is what landed him the job. Imagine if it was a Freddy Krueger type voice coming out the other end of that line.
Hiya, Sydney. Hiya, Sydney. I can be your long-distance boyfriend now.
I should be a voice actor. He would also always be on set for his scenes, but he never met the actors he was working with. They continued this for the entire franchise, where he would be sitting on the phone in a room with a monitor and he could watch the actors, but obviously they couldn't see him. Some other behind-the-scenes horror stories come from them simply just trying to find the location to shoot this film. The house had to have a lot of glass, making Casey Becker vulnerable to the killers while also making her think that she was safe within the confines of the house. Here's some rather sad tea for you, but it kind of sets the stage for the production. It's a story from a scouting trip they went on in Wilmington. Wes said, "I hope someone sees this movie. He was so depressed about his career. I guess Vampire in Brooklyn was so devastating to him personally." Apparently, there was also a tragedy on the set of Vampire in Brooklyn. A stunt woman actually died very early on in filming. And then the movie kind of flopped, so one could probably assume that Wes definitely did need a win at this point in his career. But getting the damn location for this film was very difficult, and they finally found what they were looking for in Sonoma and Santa Rosa in California. When the school they were planning to shoot in asked for the script, a censorship battle actually ensued between the school and the filmmakers. Apparently this case got national attention, and Wes Craven was quoted at the time in the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. "It's been a nightmare. You don't want to think you're in a society that's so reactionary. The way this is being depicted were some sort of lowlifes who have crawled out of a rock someplace to depict violence." Craven even threatened to sue the school if their requests were denied, but this was kind of a sore spot for the town at the time. Just 3 years prior, a girl had been murdered in this town because of police incompetence. They had actually stopped her murderer while he was driving on the road, and she was in his trunk at that time. But they let him go, and so she was subsequently killed. Eventually, the school board voted 4-1 against the production filming on campus. Some parents were actually upset that the school declined this production working on their campus because they said that it could afford them things like new educational equipment, stuff like that. One of the last things to roll on screen is no thanks whatsoever to the Santa Rosa City School District Governing Board. That's a level of petty that I kind of respect. We ended up with a completely iconic shooting location for the school nonetheless. We also ended up with such an iconic look for the Ghostface killer, but this was also a difficult road to traverse. Because Kevin Williamson didn't specify the look of the killer in the script, the filmmakers were like, oh god, what are we gonna do? So they hired renowned special effects makeup artist Greg Nicotero to create some masks for them. The masks that he created were these witchy goblin type looks that had these big warty noses references, and the production didn't really feel comfortable using any of them. The story of how they actually found the mask is pretty incredible. They were scouting the location for Tatum's house when in one of the children's bedrooms they found a mask that was very similar to the painting The Scream. Marion Madalena had found the mask and she was like, no, everybody stop because I fucking found it. They only needed to make really minimal changes. They dyed the shroud from white to black and they elongated the mask a little bit. Things were not smooth sailing with the mask yet though. If you weren't aware yet, Bob and Harvey Weinstein are unfortunately the executive producers of this film. It was the very first movie they were producing for their offshoot company Dimension Films. So everyone was happy with the mask, but Bob Weinstein was not, and this section of the book is literally called Bob Weinstein Wreaks Havoc on Production. He was like, I want the filmmakers to shoot this one scene in 5 different ways with 5 different masks so that I can make the decision on what mask I want. It wasn't just the mask that Weinstein didn't like. They had been filming for a few days and he wasn't happy with the dailies he'd seen. Among the things he didn't like was Barrymore's look, deciding that Drew didn't look sexy enough. Boo! Tomato! Tomato! On this channel, we hate the Weinsteins. This isn't even the first time that I've reported on their awful behavior. I featured an interview with Rob Zombie in my Halloween 2 comparison where he was talking about what a nightmare it was to work with them too. But anyway, Bob was just an absolute train wreck to work with, and I'm sure that this was not encouraging for the filmmakers. Something I didn't realize before reading this book is that Patrick Lussier was pretty heavily involved with the making of Scream. You might know him for directing the My Bloody Valentine remake. He was also in charge of keeping up the camera on Scream. So this means he received the footage each day after filming and then cut it together within a day or two for the filmmakers to review. His job was mega important because Bob and Harvey Weinstein were allegedly so unhappy with the dailies that they were considering completely doing reshoots. Like, they completely bullied Wes Craven and basically all of the producers. So then it was up to Lussier to edit together the opening sequence of the film to prove to the Weinsteins that the movie was going to be scary, that the mask was going to work, and that Drew Barrymore didn't need to look sexier. They were also considering firing Wes Craven. Like, someone hold me back right now. But after seeing the opening sequence, Weinstein realized he had been wrong. That was the first and probably the last time Bob ever admitted that he was wrong. The power of Scream, baby. The cast and crew had also all rallied around Wes Craven because they were like, no, we all care about this production and everyone involved, so if you fire him, then we walk. That's how you do it. That's how you do it with those fucking Weinsteins. That's what I would do if I ever saw Bob Weinstein. I don't think I'd ever come upon Harvey Weinstein because he's like rotting in prison, but if I ever saw Bob, I'd be like, Weinstein's tactics would only get worse as the years went on. Craven and Weinstein were opposites. Wes is a man of class, intelligence. I know that's right. But everything else about the production was apparently magic. Everyone on the film described it as feeling like they were at summer camp. I'm about to read a lot, but this is just so cute, so just deal with it. When they weren't working, they still came to set. That's where they wanted to be. When the weekends came around, it was like, what's the plan? Is everybody gonna do this? Is everybody doing that? Just complete kismet. The script was great. You had the right script, the right director, the right actors. Many also credit Craven with being the driving force of the atmosphere on set. Miller said that the director set the tone for everyone else to follow. I've worked on a few productions in my day, and let me tell you, this is rare. The only time I've really experienced this, it was on my own personal set for Somnum. We just got so lucky that these 2 actors that we cast ended up becoming best friends by the end of the day off screen. Everyone got along, there was just a flow to all of our energy, and everyone could just like execute the vision. It went off without a hitch, really. Also on the set of Never Hike Alone 2, Vinny DeSanti is great. He carries such a calm energy on set, and it really does set the tone. I've also been on sets where the exact opposite is going on. There is not a lick of chemistry. Nobody wants to be around each other. Those movies turn out like ass, believe me. I already did a deep dive on Wes Craven's career several months back, and by all accounts, he was just the most kind and calm, wonderful man. Having that kind of leadership will definitely allow you to create some magic. Another type of magic was brewing on that set because David Arquette and Courtney Cox met during a pre-production party for the film. For 3 nights in a row, we all 3 went to dinner, and each night I can see their chairs getting closer and closer. So cute, like stop it right now. Everyone just loved each other and wanted to hang out all the time. Imagine working for like 12 to 16 hours a day and still not getting enough of these people's presence. They were all staying at the same hotel, and they got a lot of noise complaints from the other guests because the shooting schedule kind of flipped their sleeping schedule. It got to the point with so many complaints that eventually they started partying in a barn down the road from the hotel. But the cutest hangout story that I read about is at this restaurant called Cha Bianca. The owners were quoted saying, "They were so nice and friendly, and they were just like family at a certain point. We also eventually befriended them in a way where we would be invited to some of their functions. Then actually, some of those cast members came back years and months later to visit with friends, and we would see some of them again." In the video store scene, a lot of the extras are actually staff from Chubyanka. So painfully often, we hear these heart-wrenching and disgusting stories of all these greatest people that work in Hollywood. Do not look up the list of directors that signed the Polanski petition unless you're extremely ready for that heartbreak, and prepare to feel terrible if you ever want to use the website Rotten Apples. You'd be unpleasantly surprised about how many of your faves have sexually harassed women. One of the greatest horror movies of all time, and one of my favorite films, period, had the most sweet and amazing cast, it seems. Like, they just had the cutest, most wholesome off-screen dynamic. Kinda lets you breathe a sigh of relief when you know that your faves are good people. No consumer guilt. They were kind of weird, though. Like, for instance, one night, David Arquette and Rose McGowan crashed a bunch of after-prom parties. So they were kinda like, who are these weirdos? And we're like, hey, we're the weirdos, what's up? What? Like, pardon? It's beyond me why they wanted to party with children, but I guess there's not that much to do in Santa Rosa. And if you're a young star from LA in the 90s, I suppose you probably would be pretty desperate to party, but no harm done, everyone was just having a blast. Looking back, it's not lost on many of those involved with the production that they were lucky to work with Craven and experience the protected environment that he created for them as young professionals. Here, do you need a tissue? I'm sorry that I didn't warn you about the cuteness overload in today's video. Yes, this is toilet paper. I ran out of tissues. What are you, some kind of royalty? Didn't realize the Queen was watching my YouTube videos. Wait. So production is done, wonderful times. It kind of makes me sad thinking about how it's over for them, because for us, we can watch this movie anytime and be transported to that time and place. For the cast and crew, the magic is in the making. Don't be sad it's over, be glad it all happened, I guess. But when the film was complete, they had a really tough time getting their R rating because they kept getting hit with the NC-17. Like, it was submitted 9 different times before they got their R rating. Initially, when the film came out too, they thought that they had a flop because the producers would sneak into the screenings and the audience would be dead silent. They took this to mean that the audience was completely disengaged. I went up to Carmel and Wes went off to Hawaii feeling so sad when we had a flop. Imagine you make the movie Scream and you think you made a flop. But what they didn't know was that the exit polls were amazing and the word of mouth was so good it went on to make $6 million in its opening weekend. And then it stayed in theaters for 6 months, an unprecedented run. It was winning awards at the MTV Movie Awards. Nev Campbell was invited to host SNL.
Excuse me, are you up a car, Nevy?
That's Nev. Hello?
Hello, Nev.
It ultimately grossed $157 million just at the domestic box office alone, and coincidentally, the use of caller ID tripled in the year 1997. We'll pick up on the behind-the-scenes stories in my next video when I cover Scream 2, so I'll leave that there for now. So many trials and tribulations to get this movie made, which is not uncommon for pretty much any movie made in history, but there were so many moments where things could have taken a turn for the worst. With all the Weinstein nonsense, at any point, anyone could have just been like, you know what, fuck this, I'm out. A single person could have thrown off the je ne sais quoi of the cast chemistry, but thanks to the horror gods, it was kismet. Of course, this kicked off the franchise that we're gonna keep talking about leading up to the release of Scream 6, so it's also the franchise that just keeps on giving. Now you know the behind-the-scenes story, but why was this movie so iconic? Well, now it's time to go over the plot breakdown of this film and deconstruct the genius of it. I cannot actually stress to you enough the importance of the opening scream of Scream. Scream of Scream. The opening scream of Scream. The opening scene of Scream. The girlies were quaking, myself included. I know this came out 3 years before I was even born, but I just know that people couldn't believe their fucking eyes when Drew Barrymore bit the dust. I know this because when I was really discovering horror as a teen, this movie left me breathless. First of all, they don't waste any time. They don't set up the ambiance. It starts with a phone call. 35 seconds into the movie, Jackson is going, I want to talk to you for a minute.
I'm sorry, I guess I dialed the wrong number.
Like, it is seductive, but it has that tinge of an edge, and that's the tone we start on. Then less than 2 minutes later, we get the first flip.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
What did you say?
That's the first time in the movie that your stomach drops, and it only keeps leveling up from there. Because a creepy guy on the phone is enough to already make you feel deeply uncomfortable, but then to introduce the notion that he also might be watching her is such a gut punch. But you're still like, it could still maybe be someone messing with her, but then...
Listen, asshole!
No, you listen, you little bitch. You hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand?
Oop. okay, oh, he's serious. Then she's getting really worked up and upset naturally, and her performance is so top fucking tier in this scene. Drew Barrymore, the actress that you are. But she had a little help to get her into that headspace. In order to get her amped up, we'd be rolling, we'd slate it, and he'd be whispering in her ear about how animals are slaughtered for food or vicious stuff for imagery. Wes was fiercely protective of his young actors, but he was not above doing things like that to get a good performance out of them, and hey, it worked. The other most brilliant thing about this scene, in my opinion, is the constant false hope they give you about her survival. Because when you're a first-time viewer, you're not thinking that she's gonna die. We've opened with her, she's on the poster, she's the main character, right? Even upon my 50 millionth viewing, I'm always wishing for things to go differently, because it's just so brutal and horrible. It's like, oh my god, maybe this time it'll be different. But there's so much false hope, like she's running away from the house and her parents are rolling up, and it seems so good for her because her parents are on the porch, she's right next to the porch, you're like, oh my god, just turn around. She even ends up on the phone with her mom while she dies and then gets strung up. Like, the opening of this movie is deeply fucked up. Apparently the gore from Steve getting gutted and her body being strung up was very disturbing for the crew. It was so realistic and horrifying that crew members would turn away from it whenever they had to pass by. In conclusion, it's probably the best horror movie opening in movie history, but you just had to be there. I know that for a lot of people, this opening was probably spoiled for them, like for the younger end of Gen Z that really grew up on the internet. My heart breaks for you, truly. But right after this, we meet Sydney and Billy. I love the hair in this movie so goddamn much. Look at that little ponytail. So let's talk about Sydney and Billy's impact. The most iconic line from this scene is definitely,
The Exorcist was on. Got me thinking of you.
It did?
people put that on Spooky Valentine's cards. I think that's one of his most referenced quotes. This scene sets him up so well because he like really wants to get laid, but he's also like, I would never dream of breaking your underwear rule. So we're like, okay, consent king. I know the most popular thing that came from this scene is probably the Exorcist line, but Your Honor, I have something else to say. And this is why this was a bisexual awakening. Them kissing is so hot. Sex sells. I don't know what to tell you. This movie is so gay, by the way. I know that scene in particular is a demonstration of heterosexual excellence. I still feel like it's really gay, and I need to try to explain this. I guess my only reasoning is that it definitely causes bi panic. You experience that a lot with this movie because literally the entire cast is so hot, like good luck. More character introductions. In the following scene, we meet both Gail and Tatum, two of the most iconic women from this franchise. Gail does not get paid her due for returning for every single entry of this franchise. Sydney gets all the love, and I get it, I do, but I am personally Team Gail. We'll probably go over her character development as we go through the franchise, but her arc is the best, and that is a hill that I'm willing to die on. Sydney doesn't need much character development. She's like a very morally stable person from the very first moment we meet her. Granted, she goes through some trauma and unpacking that in the following sequels, but Gail's arc is just more satisfying. Okay, we'll come back to that. So moving on to Tatum, the impact that this woman has, I cannot stress enough, but that will become more apparent the more outfits that we see her in and the more dialogue that we hear her deliver. Also, you guys, there's no way, like there's just no fucking way. How did none of us realize that Rose McGowan is the woman in this meme?
But imagine how tired we are. Imagine how tired we are of it.
No, I know, and I'll give you this moment to process it, but I am afraid that we do also have to move on. The next iconic scene is undoubtedly the fountain scene where they're debating how a human can gut another human.
How do you gut someone?
You take a knife and you slit him from groin to sternum. It's called tact, you fuck rag. What are you saying? I killed her?
It would certainly improve your high school Q.
I think Stu's dialogue is probably what's most iconic about this scene, but what baffles me is just how right off the bat this movie is so obvious about who the killers are. Literally 20 minutes into the movie, Stu is speaking so candidly about how easy it is to gut someone, and then Randy calls it. But that's not my favorite line of dialogue from that scene. I think that my favorite line is much more underrated. We all know that Stu does the tongue thing with his liver joke.
Better live her alone. Leave her alone!
But when the camera pans away from Stu, he's like still trying to explain his joke.
Ow, liver. It was a joke.
Maybe I was off an edible, or maybe that's hilarious and not enough people are talking about it, so I'll let you decide. Billy and Stu are both just so obviously nuts from the jump. Surely some of you guys called it, because whenever I watch this film, which is at least like once a year, I just feel dumber and dumber thinking about how I didn't see it coming at all the first time I watched it. Granted, I was like 15 or 16, but still, we'll come back to that. One of the next scenes is also one of the most iconic from this movie, but I feel like you can say that about almost any scene in Scream.
Tatum, just get in the car.
Hello, Sydney.
I don't know how to explain it, but this is my favorite outfit in this movie besides Tatum's death outfit. She looks so comfy and so 90s, and I'm like, that right there is why this is a comfort film. When I first saw this movie the very first time, I was like, this is the most brilliant piece of meta commentary I have ever seen. The irony is how she calls out the fact that girls are always running up the stairs when they should be going out the front door, and then she herself has to run up the stairs because she locked the door earlier in the scene. What I didn't notice until this viewing is how obvious the stunt double is. Like, I'm sorry? I don't know if you'll be able to unsee it now, but I was watching the scene intently and I was like, who is this? Anyway, Billy shows up and then his little phone falls out of his pocket and I'm like, you are the worst killer in the world, because then he gets arrested. And again, I feel so frustrated by being so dumb in the past. But that's why the movie is so brilliant, because it's just stupid how obvious Billy is. Because then you'd never guess that it would be him. It's never the first person that you suspect. Unless it is. This is also the scene where we meet Dewey, one of the holy trinity of Scream. I think that first impression is one of the reasons why I have never really been a Dewey stan, and I know that if I asked the Dewey fan club to rise up, there would be a fair amount of noise. I'm happy to report that I think that I finally want in. This is looking back retroactively, knowing what character development is in store for him, but also realizing that in this movie, he's just a boy. Like, he's just a little guy. But he's also kind of ridiculous, so I sympathize with Tatum when she says things like this.
Her dad's out of town, all right? She's staying with us tonight.
Does Mom know?
Yes, doofus.
Let's get you out of here.
Not enough noise is made for how Tatum calls people names, and so I'm gonna keep calling attention to that. Another insanely iconic line is uttered not 30 seconds after that, but I never see this one on people's top 10 lists.
Jesus, the camera, hurry!
My name isn't Jesus.
Of course, there is so much good dialogue from these movies, but this one just has never been paid its due. Underrated lines right there. Kenny the cameraman, rest in peace, but you're so not important. I think that line was the best contribution he gave to this film. The next clip I have to show you just shows how ahead of its time Scream was and how timeless it remains.
Hi, Gail Webb is reporting live from Woodsbury Police Station. Hey, watch the hand! You know what you're dealing with here?
Gail is the OG influencer. She is the blueprint. She thinks she has these special privileges to get into the police station, and she's like, don't you know who I am? Last year at Coachella, to my limited knowledge, there was this like super special, very expensive little festival that was kind of adjacent to it, and the transportation was a nightmare. Like, not enough buses, so many people left stranded in the sun, and there were so many videos of influencers going up to like the bus drivers and stuff when the buses were full, and they're like, don't you know who I am? And like showing their follower count. Gail was the blueprint. If Gail had an Instagram back in 1996, I'm sure she would have been pulling it up. With or without Instagram, the way Gail acts in this movie, she deserves that punch. It's karma. Now, after that whole debacle at the station, they're staying at Tatum's house, and Sydney is wearing this amazing big t-shirt with her little white socks. If there's one thing about Sydney in the original Scream, she is going to be comfy. And of course, she gets a call from the killer, which exonerates Billy. And once again, I need to hear some noise from the Tatum fan club.
Are you kidding me? Look at this place. It's like Christmas.
Stupidity leak.
Moving on to more iconic dialogue that gets ignored, and for what?
You make me so sick. Your entire havoc-inducing, thieving, whoring generation disgusts me.
Those kids deserve that. I'm not gonna act like they didn't, but goddamn. Henry Winkler was like, oh, they want a cameo? Well, they're gonna get a fucking cameo. Underrated dialogue. It is. So anyway, then Dewey and Gail meet. They have their little meet cute. It does eventually feel genuine and cute, but the entire premise of their first meeting is just Gail manipulating the shit out of him for information.
You know, in a demographic study, I proved to be most popular amongst males 11 to 24. Of course, you don't look a day over 12.
And it doesn't get much better throughout this movie, honestly. Even the first time they kiss, I'm like, I don't know. Because she is flirting with him, but to me, it has never felt genuine because her underlying motive the whole time is just to get the information out of him. She's a career woman. She wants to get her story. Maybe that's also why I like Dewey a little bit more this time around, because I'm becoming increasingly aware of Gail's tactics.
You are much prettier in person.
So you do watch the show?
I'm 25. I was 24 for a whole year.
And like, that is cute. It is. I don't know what else you want me to say. Up next on the docket, I want to talk about the death of sex in films and potentially the death of a certain breed of man. Because when Stu is carrying Tatum and he kisses her neck out in broad daylight, I'm like, why are men these days so physically out of reach? You know how Tinkerbell needs people to believe in her and clap for her or she'll die? Well, that's how I am with physical touch. I need to be glued to my partner and exist in a constant state of foreplay. Is that so much to ask for? Apparently, because this scene made me mourn. born. Or maybe no one's just ever loved me that much. As did the next scene where we get Wes Craven's iconic cameo dressed as Freddy Krueger in the school. Another top 10 most iconic line moment comes from Tatum when she's like, "You're starting to sound like another Wes Carpenter flick or something." It has layers, it's meta, she's referencing the director of the film, she's referencing John Carpenter, she mixes them up, haha. Then we get to the iconic video store scene, and yet again I have to ask how more of us did not see this coming.
Why would he want to kill his own girlfriend?
There's always some stupid bullshit reason to kill your girlfriend. Maybe Sydney wouldn't have sex with him.
Up until that point, that literally does seem like the reason why Billy would be the killer. Because he's gone on about wanting his girlfriend back, feeling like they're edited for TV. It seems like he leads with his dick, it's true. One of the things that has always struck me as so pathetic in the best way possible is when Randy is like, "So do you think that Sydney would ever give me a chance?" And honestly, Stu responds in the most appropriate way that I could think of.
No, I don't at all. No.
As he should. I'm sorry. I know that the Randy fan club will tell me that I'm wrong, but Sydney is so far out of his league. Like, let's be so serious for 2 seconds here. Sometimes men need to be told that because when they were growing up, their mom told them that they were the most handsome boy in the whole world, and I'm sorry, it's just not true. Randy gives me that vibe, but I think he figures it out by the sequel, so it's fine. Anyway, this is just another instance where Billy and Stu are so idiotic because Randy is like, "No, the dad's just the red herring. It's obviously Billy."
I'm telling you, the dad's a red herring. It's Billy. How do we know you're not the killer?
And I kind of love how obvious it is in hindsight. Is that just me? Because I was still so shocked during my first viewing and no one can take that away from me. But by this point in the movie, Sydney is starting to drink the Kool-Aid and she's talking with Tatum and she's like, "Ugh, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me. Yes, my mom was brutally murdered just a year ago, but my boyfriend has sexual needs."
Yeah, but he has been so patient with me. You know, with all the sex stuff. How many guys would put up with a girlfriend who's sexually anorexic?
Girl, what? Another moment that always gives me pause to say the same thing is here because literally why is Dewey eating ice cream? They wanted to make him so boyish and dumb for what? A, to make fun of cops? B, to make it more realistic how Gale would get so much information out of him? C, to make an underdog? D, to throw us off the scent because in reality he's a deranged killer. Though if you're 25 years old and you're still eating ice cream like that, you have to be kind of deranged. 2/3 of us are lactose intolerant, okay? So if you're not, then count your blessings. Fast forward a few minutes and we enter the most iconic scene and the entire third act of the movie. Maybe you've heard tell of this scene because it ended up being 45 minutes long. It took so long to shoot that by the end of it, the crew got t-shirts that said "I survived scene 118" at the end of it. I would wager the scenes in the living room contain probably most of the lines of dialogue that end up on those top 10 lists, such as
Terror Train, Prom Night. How come Jamie Lee Curtis is in all of his movies?
She's the scream.
I'm not hearing enough noise for Jamie Lee Curtis. Are you guys still with me? If you weren't then, you will be now, because now it's time to talk about Tatum's nipples, and I'm not even sorry. I'm not sorry because this was done with tact. This was done with outrage in mind. And I was like, "I'm gonna corrupt American minds," Rose McGowan said with a laugh. "I did it on purpose." From the lips of Rose McGowan herself. Besides Casey, I think that this is the most iconic death in the film because you're so mad about it. Tatum is so unscared, and she's so Tatum about it, and that's what gets her killed.
No, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
Yes, that is her most iconic line, but she had something even more iconic to say off screen, if you can believe that. So she decided to perform this stunt herself, and she ended up all bruised, and this is what she had to say about it. "They had a stunt double for me, but she's kind of markedly bigger than I was physically. I'm built like, where's my parasol? But in reality, my brain is like Scrappy-Doo that's like, let's go. It's a bad mix. I have this delicate body, but my brain is like, kill them all." So I was like, no, I'll do my own stunts. You know what? I think I'll let that one speak for itself. She's so me-coded, like I'm tiny, but I will let myself get bruised 10 times over for a scene. "I sacrifice my mortal shell in the name of cinema." I don't know where that came from, sorry. Okay, more underrated lines incoming.
I'll tell you what, once you guys go up to my parents' room, you know, you guys can talk. Whatever.
Subtleties too, you should look it up.
One of the best things about this movie is how funny it is. Like, that's comedy. It's kind of bottom of the barrel, but it feels very true to life because teenage boys are the most ridiculous breed of human. This moment with Billy and Sydney is such a cautionary tale moment. I know they finally let a final girl have sex, but it's also kind of weird because she's been brainwashed into thinking that she owes it to him. But that scene again causes so much bisexual panic, and this is also where the meta commentary gets ramped up to an 11. Before we get into that though, I yet again have to ask you guys if I had an appropriate reaction to this moment.
What? The blood is all wrong. Why do they do that? It's too red.
Like, who is this fucking guy, and why did that make me bust up laughing? Again, was it the edibles or was it the comedic genius? I'll let you decide. I don't need your help for this next one though, don't worry.
Jesus Christ, you don't know the rules?
Have an aneurysm, why don't you?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
Iconic! That's probably the most commonly referenced line from these films. There are certain rules you must abide by to survive a horror film. Randy was a cultural reset. I really haven't spoken about him enough. Never in horror had we, the horror fan, seen ourselves. Finally, someone in the movie had seen all the same movies that we had, and it was legendary. We were so past due for another character like him, so thank God we had Mindy in the new Scream movie last year, but we'll get there when we get there. In that scene, he also sets up that you're never supposed to say, "I'll be right back," because you simply won't be. Now, us horror fans were all drooling over that last scene because we felt so represented. We were like, oh my god, this is so me-coded. And then Gail, who is watching the same scene as us, goes,
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror
Boring.
we were literally watching it and loving it. That's comedy. Then she says she'll be right back when she goes with Dewey. This is another huge subversion to the trope where they make it all kind of spooky that she's going out with Dewey, because then they end up being ran off the road and they start to kiss, which I've already mentioned. I'm like, I don't know if that's for me, because at this moment, Gail is not worthy of Dewey, and it's so funny how that goes back and forth throughout the franchise. Another underrated line in this scene though.
Do you know what that consolation is?
No, what is it?
I don't know. That's why I was asking you.
That is comedy. I need some of you guys to kind of pick up the slack because there are so many underrated lines that no one talks about, and I feel like you're not even trying. Sidney is still upstairs having slept with Billy, but things are getting suspicious again because he cannot keep his cool. Then we have one of the most memorable and tense scenes of the film when the killer comes up behind Randy.
Jamie, look behind you. Look behind you.
We'll discuss this as it's referenced later in the franchise, my dear children. Another moment that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough is just minutes later when Randy runs up to Gail's van and she clocks him with her giant cell phone. That is comedy. I don't understand why I have to keep spelling it out for you. So now we're down to the final stretch, and things are about to get so gay. Dewey has been knifed in the back. He did it. No, he did it. Fuck you both. That's right. When it comes to trusting the word of one of your friends, tell them both to fuck off and save yourself. That's the type of survival instinct that not many can begin to understand. At least not in horror movies, because everyone always has to be the hero and try to save their friend even though they're bleeding out through their stomach or their thigh, and they're not gonna make it either way. Sidney said, not in my movie. Well, actually she doesn't say that until later. Then Billy is revealed as a killer, as is Stu. The crowd goes wild. No one saw this coming except for Randy. This is when it then becomes abundantly clear that Kevin Williamson was channeling his gay into the film. Look how cuddly Bill and Stu are with each other. Like, that is so fucking gay. Reading The Bromance, Homosocial Relationships in Film and Television by Michael DeAngelis has a whole chapter titled Fears of a Millennial Masculinity Screams Queer Killers. There you have it, folks.
It's a scream, baby!
It's not just how cuddly they are and how smitten Stu seems with Billy. It's also about the metaphorical dicks.
Ready? Yeah. I'm ready, baby! Hit it! Hit it! My turn.
Don't forget, stay to the side and don't go too deep.
They're literally stabbing each other like, ooh, don't stick it in too deep. And this Letterboxd review, I think, sums it up perfectly. Just two guys taking turns stabbing each other because they're not gay. I feel obliged to play the Vine that is referencing because now that Vine is almost a decade old.
Two bros chilling in the hot tub, 5 feet apart cause they're not gay.
And I feel ancient having played that, but that is a cultural touchstone that you needed to be aware of if you weren't already.
You know what? While I was editing this, I was like, I don't think they're listening. I think that I need a little help. So without further ado, we have Francisco Angel to answer the question, are they gay?
Oh, they gay. Listen, if these two were eating candy, any type of candy after their killing sprees, it would be Skittles, because these two were tasting the fucking rainbow. If Scream teaches us anything, is that internalized homophobia creates psychopaths. I mean, 2 + 2 is 4. And if you don't believe me, I have evidence from Miss Sidney Prescott herself from her best-selling book, Out of Darkness, chapter 5, page 69, paragraph 2. They smelled of fruit and deep-seated mommy issues. So, in conclusion,
You haven't returned
You are gay! There you have it. I literally needn't speak on the subject any further. That was perfect. Thanks, babes. By the way, the slasher movie coming to you soon.
Now there are some lines from this scene that will make me crack up no matter how many times I see this film.
Hello?
What's your motive?
Peer pressure. I'm far too sensitive. Fucking hit me with the phone, Dick! Can you really call the police?
You
Get your sorry ass out.
My mom and dad are gonna be so mad.
These all end up on those top 10 lists, and with good reason. I have no pushback to that. Also, has anyone ever noticed that Randy looks like Shaggy in this scene? Like, what is he wearing? But this is when Sydney takes care of business, the boys are dead, she fires one last shot and is like, not in my movie, solidifying herself as one of the most iconic final girls of all time. Yes. Gail is badass in this finale too, but Sydney's really doing most of the grunt work. That will change over time though, and me and my fellow Gail fan club members patiently await our moment. Another trope this movie establishes is the unlikely survivor, which of course is Dewey. That's a trope they started too. There's always one person you thought didn't make it who actually did. I love that it's Dewey in this movie because it just kind of creates a running joke through the franchise, but it's also so well intentioned because he did absolutely nothing to help anyone in this film. Same with Randy, like the men in this movie were either crazy or beyond useless, and it let the women shine as it should. Carrying on and strengthening the final girl trope by keeping both Sydney and Gail alive. Empowering shit right there. But that really does it for the plot breakdown of the first Scream. I just can't believe I've been doing YouTube for over 3 years now, and I'm only now giving Scream a plot breakdown. But the series will continue in a pretty rapid fire fashion. I intend on getting the other 4 videos out before the release of Scream 6 on March 10th. And then of course, Scream 6 will be getting its own review. I'll be reacting to my Scream 6 predictions. This whole channel is basically just gonna be the Scream fan club for the foreseeable future. So I hope that you're hotly anticipating that, but if you'd like other bonus content from me, you can find that on Patreon. And a huge thank you to these people who keep this channel funded. Big shout out to them. They are the reason why I'm able to do stuff like this and take all this time and make these big videos. Most recently with my Tim Burton video. That one was a beast. It took months of my life. So again, a huge shout out to these people. You get 4 to 6 bonus videos over there every single month, usually including my first reactions to new horror films. So like this month so far, I've done videos on Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey and Knock at the Cabin. I'll soon do one for The Outwaters and a couple more. But if that's not for you, all the rest of my social media is linked down below. Again, I have to stress, we really would like you to join our cult, so go ahead and click subscribe and the notification bell because you'll want to be there for our next meeting, baby. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that I see you in Scream for Dummies Part 2. Bye!